to see if what happened is compliant with our procedures. And in the end, you know, I believe they are. But at the same time, I wanted to make sure that the personnel committee and the school board understand the policy, the way things were decided, just to make sure we're all on the same page moving forward. So that's a reason for the meeting today, is just to make sure we're all on the same page and that we're interpreting information in the same way. So maybe, George, would you mind just kind of going over the hiring process? Just real briefly, it doesn't have to be a long.
Super long, yeah. So we started the process on Wednesday, the 25th of August, and we had 34 candidates apply. We invited 24 candidates to interview. Not all of them could. So we ended up interviewing 18. And we did it, the initial 18, we did in what we call a speed round. And basically that's where the candidate comes in and they basically interview at a table with two different people. Most of the tables had 2 people. We had 8 teachers involved, 1 clerical, and then Jay and myself were involved as well. And we had people go, we had 6 tables going at a time. And basically they ask the same question. The first question is always the same. And then the second 2 are kind of different. And then the candidates go around, we kind of take notes. And then at the end, when all the candidates, we had 3 rounds of that. So we had 18 total candidates. We selected finalists for the final round. And the final round was then the next day. And normally we wouldn't have that kind of quick turnaround, except that we're trying to get this thing moving as fast as we can. So we did that, and then we had the final round the next day. We had 7 candidates for that, 3 internals, and then 4 that were external candidates. There was 1 person who was of the external candidates that didn't come because that night she got an offer from her own district. And so we ended up with 6 finalists. And of the 6 finalists, we landed on this individual that Carson had mentioned, who was she's from Wisconsin. She's from Eau Claire. And she does not have a Minnesota license as of yet, but has applied for one, and we're just waiting to hear from Pelsby on when that will happen. So, because she's gone through that process. But anyway, that's kind of the process, the interview process. The finalist, the candidate that we selected from Wisconsin was by far and away the top candidate in both the final round and the speed round. She was she was not the top candidate in the speed round, but she was the second highest scoring candidate. And the highest was the one who ended up getting the job offer. She was a finalist, obviously, and then took a job staying in South Washington County. So that's kind of where we're at. The candidate that we selected, I don't know if you want me to go on further about the candidate at all, or do you want me to?
If I could just take a moment then to ask Amy Fletch, who is on this call, but I think one of the things that we want to make sure that we're following all of our procedures and making it. Oh, she can't. You can't hear it.
You're going in and out when you talk. I could hear George fine and Karsten fine, but I can't hear you.
It's always me. And the mask is not gonna help, but I'll speak louder and slower. How is that? Can you get me now? Okay, so Amy, I just want to ask from your perspective, did we follow the procedures that are in our policies for hiring a candidate like this?
Yes, we followed the procedures in the handbook as they stand now. Yes.
Okay.
I believe George did.
Because I think the biggest concern we've had the last several hirings has been, are we following our own guidelines? And so I want to make sure that from your perspective, your office, because you're the guru, all the extra knowledge about how we should be handling hiring. I want to make sure you're loud and clear.
I will say the biggest question that I had was that the posting, which was included in your agenda packet, stated that the required licensure was a Minnesota license, administrator license. But, you know, as I kind of dove into it a little more, Karsten and I talked about it. We talked about it with George several times. Ultimately, according to the procedures, George gets to determine, you know, the process. And so really what it comes down to is George determined the process. The process that he determined did follow the procedures to the best of our knowledge. And if the board wants to go ahead with this, then we're in support of that. That's where it stands right now. That's kind of why we're here, just to make it transparent, make sure everybody understands what's going on. You know, I can't be in every hiring location all the time, and I have to trust the administrators that they know what they're doing. And sometimes it involves a little more interactive dialogue than other hires, and this was one of those.
Mhm.
So
So it's subjective to some degree, but I think all interviews end up being that at some point.
I'm sorry, you cut out again.
I think at some point, most interviews become a little bit subjective because a person might ask a question that requires us to maybe elaborate a little more on a position that they may not have done with a prior person because they didn't get asked that question.
Correct. Yep.
So always a little bit of nuance to each interview.
Yep.
We can have as close of a outline to follow. But I mean, I was just interviewing somebody in my workplace and we did the same exact thing. I mean, we followed the same procedure for each person. So I get it. I understand that it does end up being just a little bit different based on the questions that the interviewee might ask. And, you know, who is responding and how they are responding. But for the most part, if we're following what we say we're going to do, that's all I can ask. I think that's all we can ask.
Yeah, we have to allow for not flexibility in the policy, but flexibility to have those conversations and not be so rigid that we're not having that dialogue amongst each other. So we've had a pretty hefty flow of conversation between the three of us. And it's been good. It's been good dialogue. So.
And can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I was just gonna say on the licensing issue is taken care of, assuming that this person will get a Minnesota license. So it's not that we're hiring someone who won't have a Minnesota license because she ultimately will, correct? So
I'm assuming, I mean, that I can't guarantee that because I'm not with BOSA. I am not with the state. All we can do is the best that we can do to have her apply and go through the process and support her on that journey. And then however the outcome is, and I'm learning, I'll be honest, I'm learning about administrative licensing through this process. I'm a little more familiar with the teacher licensing than administrative licensing. Teacher licensing goes through PELSB, this goes through BOSA. So it's a completely different kind of situation. Karsten could probably speak to that more than I can, but.
That's for the Board of School Administrators. So, Amy. And there are multiple ways of getting exceptions to, full-fledged licensure. One would be something similar to a variance where the school district can declare that there weren't any licensed candidates who met the minimum standards, and so we're requesting a variance. That's not true in this case because we had other licensed candidates. But in this particular candidate's case, because she's licensed in the state of Wisconsin, then she can apply for what's called a provisional license through the state of Minnesota. So it's more accelerated, and then it's up to her to apply for that provisional license. If she doesn't get the provisional license, then she's not going to be employed here.
Well,
Her until she actually has a license in hand.
Do we know how long that takes?
It takes a few weeks, it depends on how fast we can help expedite that. That's really gonna be the thing, but I think we were looking at maybe late September, early October. I would imagine it'd probably be maybe October 1, that is kind of the date that I can confidently say, yes, that'll be the case, so.
Is that a concern for you?
No, because to be honest with you, it didn't matter who we hired, we would have probably been in the same boat, because either they were gonna be from out of district and we were gonna have to wait till the district was able to hire somebody in their place, or it was internal and we'd have to fill that spot, and you know what I mean, like those kind of things. So really, when it all shakes out, I mean, we would have had to wait anyway. I mean, because of the resignation of our assistant principal was so late, that kind of caused this to happen. So like, we're gonna be, it's gonna be a month. We're gonna make sure it works out good. It's not like we haven't done this before. So when I get so I know we can make it happen. And the good news is I have been in contact with the candidate just to make sure that everything's going smoothly as far as the provisional license application and things like that. And I did get an email this morning saying that her check cleared with Pelsby, so that's who they apply with, is Pelsby. I think BOSA just kind of signs off on it, but I think it's through Pelsby. The provisional license is through Pelsby. So anyway, the good news is that I think things are moving. Usually when a check clears, that's a good sign. I mean, so I think things are moving in the right direction. Yeah.
Amy has her hand raised.
Just to make it clear also, during the contingent offer phase, that will be part of this person's contingent offer, that employment is contingent upon receipt of this license. So we're going to be stating that in there, just to make that clear also. And then I just want to say, for the record, since I wasn't at any of these interviews, the interview process that George did, and because it's just impossible for Karsten and I to be part of all of those all the time, I do want to support George in this hire. But I need to state just for the record that I was not involved in this. And so to the best of my knowledge, the process was followed.
I have one other question just to follow up on something you said, Amy. With the posting of the job, we said we required a Minnesota license. So are you feeling that we were excluding people because we didn't add a Wisconsin licensure? Because, I mean, I've certainly applied to jobs where I didn't meet all the criteria, but I've applied anyway. I mean, how rigid is that? Because you had mentioned it, so I just wanted to circle back.
Well, I mean, I guess to put it in perspective, we do hire teachers who are not fully licensed yet, and their hire is contingent upon receipt of licensure. So it's roughly the same thing. We put it on as a requirement because I put the posting up based on how the approval to post is submitted to me. And I normally don't question it unless there's some blaring discrepancy of some kind. And then it's really up to George to decide how that hiring process goes based on the guidelines outlined in the administrative handbook.
Okay.
So
So it wouldn't be unusual to accept a candidate with a Wisconsin license for an interview.
it is not unusual in my experience to interview somebody with an out-of-state license to teach in our district, because that's what I know.
Okay. Well, and I would almost think, because we're on the border of Wisconsin, it might just make it cleaner or easier to always put Minnesota/Wisconsin licensure when we're looking for a candidate. That way, I mean, I don't know. I'm not doing your job. I don't understand.
Sometimes we put receipt of licensure within X amount of time, like give a time frame. And maybe going forward, we do something like that with an administrative position, just to kind of broaden the scope so we don't get, because we might get a great candidate, I don't know, from Tennessee. I'm just picking, we don't want anyone to not apply because they don't meet the requirement, I guess. So maybe broaden, especially an administrative situation or even a teacher. We've gotten some great teachers in the last couple of years who are not from Minnesota. So we don't want that to keep people from applying either. So that's something we can look at just to be flexible.
I think we should just consider adding to the bottom, have a Minnesota license or the ability to obtain one. And then that covers everything.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, because we do require possession of a license in this case before, she can start. So I think that's the key, like Jay said, either have a license or you can get it by such and such a date.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you going through this. It sounds like you were very thorough, all of you. I don't really have a problem with this. I understand this is going to be, are we bringing this to the board for approval this evening or the next?
I'm not added to this evening's agenda. I'm thinking that it'd be more appropriate to wait the 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because by then we're hoping to develop a license. Plus, I think it's important to, whenever we can, to have some lag time, between a committee meeting
For
and
sure.
recommendation of the board. So, and in this case, there are only 2 board members here, so it'd be nice if Holly had a chance to ask questions too, at some point.
Well, I appreciate you giving us a really good full scope of what's going on. It sounds like, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to tighten up making sure we're following the procedures that are in place. And it sounds like you did that. I appreciate that immensely. I know I can speak for our whole board when I say that. We appreciate that immensely. So, I guess we'll hopefully keep our fingers crossed and hopefully see this person in 2 weeks on the agenda.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Short meeting, so we have
Short
time
meeting.
between now and the other meeting.
Okay, well, I guess we don't have any other business because it's not on the agenda. So we are adjourned at 5:09. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Actually, my kid's playing tennis, so I might run down there and watch
Why don't you
her. I do want to touch base with you for just a second and see in person at the Red Wing High School pod in the J area at the high school, and I will call this meeting to order. All right, you're gonna have to bear with me because I'm so used to doing roll call. All board members are present except for Anna Ostendorf, who is unable to be with us this evening, and I believe Holly Tower will be joining us momentarily. I'll ask if we can all rise and join me in the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nikki Buck has agreed and offered to share our mission statement this evening.
Do I turn my mic on then?
No?
Okay. Mission. The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens.
Thank you so much. The meeting agenda is listed out in your packet. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda this evening?
Motion to approve the agenda?
Motion made by Jim. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Sure.
Second by Jennifer. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so the first on our agenda this evening is the educational plan. So I'll just call your attention to that. It's in our board packet and it's also up on an easel here in our room. So it's always there as a reminder about what our core values are and what we're striving to do every single day in the Red Wing Public Schools. The next item on our agenda is recognition and upcoming events. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share today?
Yeah, Pam, if I could mention that I regret to inform you that Jana Langhans, a sophomore at Red Wing Public Schools, died over the weekend. She's from Lake City, but had enrolled here, and so we regret her loss. Of course, her family's in our thoughts.
Thank you, Carson. It's hard to begin a school year on such a somber note, and our thoughts, of course, are with that family and for those students and other members of our community who are struggling in any way, shape, or form. Please know that you have a wonderful community here who cares about you, and all you have to do is reach out, and there will be lots of people that will be able to support you. So I just encourage you, if you're a student or a parent or a community member who's ever having a difficult time, we've got many, many resources at your disposal here. And we just encourage you, implore you to reach out anytime. Thank you. Other recognitions or upcoming events?
How the first day of school went?
First day of school today. Happy New Year. That's exciting. And I will say kudos to all of our athletes. They're well underway in their sports this year already, so that's awesome. Soccer and middle school volleyball and tennis are all going on right now, so that's exciting. I've seen runners going by, so that's pretty exciting. And so it's just a great feeling to see our kids in the building laughing and being together on the courts and cheering one another on their fields. So a little bit of a normal feeling, which is great to feel and see and experience. The other piece that I just want to take a moment is to say thank you to our community members, to our school community, to my fellow board members. We've had a really rough 18 or so months. We've had to have some really difficult conversations. We've had to make some really difficult decisions. I know those aren't going away, but I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time, the energy. I know it's paid a huge price at the people at this table, but also I know in our district, anyone who's tied to our district as a staff member, a teacher, student, a parent, a guardian, it's been rough. And I am super excited to begin a new school year with some semblance of normalcy. And so thank you. And I'm excited about the new year. The other piece that I want to say is that in our difficult decisions, we haven't always agreed. And that's okay. I've appreciated the dialogue that we've had. It's come to me in many ways, and I thank you for that. At the end of the day, if whatever our vote is, I know that regardless of the vote, we're always 7-0 in terms of supporting our district and the decisions that are made at this table. And we stand as a united front, and I thank you all for that effort. And I look forward to even learning more from each other and having respectable dialogue and moving together through this school year. So thank you. Any other recognitions or upcoming events? Seeing none, the next order on our agenda is public comment, and I don't believe I have received any public comment this evening.
I
Nor
did not
has
either.
the superintendent. So then we get to go on to COVID-related topics.
First of all, we have some COVID data shared with the board. It was updated just today because we get numbers from county at the beginning of each week. So you'll see that in every board packet. And it's always updated, the day of the board meeting. So do you have any questions about that data sheet that I shared in the packet?
The data that's provided by the county, is that still 2 weeks behind or is that more current?
Yeah, it's behind for some of the data points. So for example, the CDC metric that's used for a lot of different things gets processed through the county and then we receive it on one Monday, but the CDC has already posted, the next version. So we are a little bit behind in terms of sharing the data.
So 2 weeks is normal?
1 or 2 weeks.
That's not true. Okay.
Yeah, so it shows good trend lines, but it may or may not be the latest, greatest information. I will say that, information about, how many kids are isolated or quarantined, that should be up to date as of, today, for example. So we've had some discussion about face covering policy. And of course, this time we had to go it alone in terms of developing our own policy. We weren't able to rely on the School Board Association or the state in terms of exactly what the face covering policy looks like. So don't be surprised if you see this topic quite frequently over the next few weeks or months as we learn some of the nuances. One of the big areas of concern that we noticed has to do with student athletics. Right now, we're the only school in the Big 9 that requires our athletes to wear masks indoors, like for athletic competitions. Currently, we allow spectators not to wear masks. It's recommended but not required. So we have concerns about both of those things, and what we'd like to recommend today is to allow our student athletes and other competitors not to be wearing their face masks while they're actually playing. So if they're playing, they won't be wearing the face mask. If they're sitting on the bench, they would be wearing face masks. And then we're asking that spectators, including people who go to athletic events, would also be required to wear face coverings. That issue really surfaced recently because if we didn't change the policy, then we could have kids at the event all, close to each other without masks on, even though during the day they're required to wear masks. And so that raised some concerns for us that, we wanted to start requiring spectators to wear masks. Also, we'd like to provide some options for administrators to make exceptions to the face covering policy, because the 7 board members and I can't anticipate every single possibility that might be out there. And there are some cases when I think it's obvious that we would not require face coverings, and we don't want to wait 2 weeks until the next board meeting. And so we did include that as a recommendation in changing policy 808. The next item has to do with criteria and timing for revoking the face coverings policy. That was brought up to me to bring something back to the board. And so you can see the recommendation that's included in the board packet. What we'd like to do is use the CDC metric in terms of high, substantial, moderate, or low transmission in the county. We talked about all sorts of different metrics. If we want to look at vaccination rates or positivity rates, those kinds of things. But we all kind of coalesced on using that particular metric to decide when we have to wear masks and when we can take them off. You'll notice that the biggest recommendation is not to jump back and forth week by week, because some of this data fluctuates and it can change as data is refined with time. And so our suggestion is that if there are 3 weeks in the low or moderate category, 3 consecutive weeks, then we could not require masks. And then once we're at that level, then we'd need 3 weeks to go back into wearing masks. So at least that's a recommendation. We're open to suggestions from school board members, and we can always come back with another refinement. Also, I'd like to add that I think it would be prudent to review the face covering policy and the criteria for taking on or taking off or putting on masks, perhaps at the second meeting of every month, just to make sure, if there are questions, if there's some changes that to be made. So at least once a month, we would review those 2 documents. And that's all I have in terms of those 2 issues.
So what I'd like to suggest is if we could still put our names in the queue for when we have a comment, that worked really well. We monitor that, and that just will help with the dialogue, because I don't want to miss people who might be on the end. So it looks like Mr. Bryant.
No, Jennifer's first.
Jennifer, go ahead. Thank you.
Carson, I was just wondering how involved the COVID response team was in putting this together. Both of these make a lot of sense to me. I like the work that's put into it, but I'm just wondering how involved they were, and Shonda was helping with it.
And in terms of the face covering policy, excuse me, the primary people involved were the high school administration, the COVID response team, Don Weddard and myself. The reason we chose the high school administrative team is because of the impact on athletics, especially spectators and the student athletes. So that's why they were picked to be part of that group. So the policy changes reflect their or our recommendations in terms of face coverings. With regard to the criteria, I know I talked to Shonda briefly about it early on, but really the recommendation comes from the COVID response team itself. And so I changed, the formatting, some of the wording, but it's consistent with what they recommended.
Mr. Bryant.
Thank you. Going back to these 2 documents, the COVID data 2021.09.04 and this proposal that you have. Just trying to see how they tie together, and I'm struggling figuring out how to do that, because you have projected 2-week case rate, cases per 10,000. CDC projected 7-day case rate. So is there a way to come up with what we're actually seeing instead of projected? We're going all the way back to 8/14 projected. So we should have, according to your comments, that's 2 weeks lag time. So we should have numbers realistic numbers going forward instead of projected, and we're going by what is determined versus projected. I'm just trying to figure out which way we're gonna go. I like the idea that we have some type of criteria in place, but it's just confusing how you get there.
Yeah, and I can answer that if you, looking at the COVID data sheet, I highlighted in gray the metric that we were planning to use. And so you see, for example, for the period ending September 4th, you can see that the projected 7-day case rate is 259. So that would be in the high category.
I understand.
And so that's the category we would use. I think your question has to do with, well, projection versus actual, probably.
Correct.
Those numbers are generally very close to one another. So I think we could, use a projection and still be able to make some determinations.
But we won't look, maybe I'm being picky here, but projected versus actual are really two different meanings. So we're going to use this, how does they, projected is one thing, and okay, they're pretty close. Maybe you need a projected, you need an actual. From going 2 weeks past, you know what the actual one is, and projected to go in the next 2 weeks going forward. Because we know probably on 8/14 what wasn't projected, there's an actual number, as there is on 8/21.
Maybe that could just be added.
Yeah,
in there
have to have
next to that.
something, instead of just using, we think it's gonna, basically we're saying, we think it's gonna be this, so we're gonna do this based upon what we think. I'd rather have more concrete points.
Yep, I know that last spring, for example, we would get the projections, and then in most cases, they were adjusted by the time everything goes through the process, and so there would be some slight differences. And so we'd update those as we went. I can talk to Shonda and Joni, who work with our county to see if we can add a row that's CDC's actual 7-day case rate, something like that.
And it's gonna be, a month ago, we should know, or the 14th, which was 20-some days ago, 20-some days ago. We know what that number is because
Right.
it's 2 weeks past.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll check with them to see, how we can change the.
Thank you. And you're next. Then
I
Arlen, then Holly.
I see that. So one of the things that I've discussed with the superintendent prior was the change from athletes wearing masks to spectators wearing masks. And I'm all for not masking our athletes. I think it's dangerous. And if we're the only ones in the Big Nine that are, how do you enforce that? With students coming here and it's awkward, and it's just, I like that it's the same. However, I'm struggling to really understand what I'd like to see is maybe do it by season. So right now, the only indoor sport we have is volleyball. We do not pack a gymnasium filled with people for a volleyball game.
There's also swimming.
And swimming. There's plenty of space for spectators to spread out. The temperature in the pool is super high, and then to add another mask on it is super stressful for spectators. So I'm just throwing out there the idea that maybe we think about it per facility, or the same thing with hockey. When we get to hockey, our arena is ginormous. We can spread out, close contact. We have this definition of close contact, 6 feet for 15 minutes or more. We can spread out in our gymnasium and in our hockey arena 6 feet or more. So, I guess we don't have to decide that now, but I really wish that there was more thought going into that. Because last week, or the last time we met, it was okay for spectators to not be wearing masks, but now it's not okay. So all of a sudden, it's changed, and it's not like we're closer to our students.
Yeah, I know that, I asked Paul Hartman, Activities Director, which one it would be easier to enforce, the masks or social distancing. His gut reaction was that it'd be easier to enforce masks rather than making sure people were at least 3 or 6 feet apart. But we hear what you're saying. Especially when you have Viking stadiums filled with 65,000 fans. It's essentially an indoor facility, big doors. And yet we can socially distance in our gym and other areas, and yet we're requiring masks. So, another issue had to do with, kids, who'd be at those events as spectators. And so we have some concerns about that. Obviously, it's an optional thing if they go watch a game or a match. But we thought it was prudent to at least recommend that to the board.
So I'm just gonna talk about behavioral things for a minute in the mind of a kid. You're in a mask all day long at school, and I'm gonna go home, and do I really wanna come back and cheer on my friends and wear a mask for another 2 or 3 hours? I think a lot of kids are gonna say, you know what, I don't. And I think we want to encourage kids to be together in our buildings where we can keep an eye on them and supervise. And it also promotes unity and community. I'm just throwing it out there as food for thought. I know most of you probably don't agree with me, and that's okay. I struggle with 2 weeks ago, it was okay for spectators to come because, the argument was it's their choice to come. And so they're putting themselves at their own risk. And now all of a sudden, it's not, the whole argument has changed. So I guess I'm just confused and a little bit frustrated that, the last time we had this conversation, it was very different.
Yeah,
and I don't know why it has to be one or the other.
Right.
I don't know why it made a difference.
Yeah, and you expressed the reason why the original recommendation was to recommend not require masks, for indoor events.
Well, and I'll be the first to tell you, I would much rather wear a mask than to watch my kids struggling, running down the court trying to wear a mask. I'll take the hit any day if that's the choice, but it just doesn't make logical sense to me that we had it one way and now we're flipping it. The argument is still the same. It's their choice. They don't have to attend. So they're putting themselves at risk if they choose to attend. Plus, we're adults. We know how to socially distance. Anyway, that is my 2 cents. Arlen, you're next in the queue.
Thank you. Got some things to say, but first, I want to address the mask and spectators' activities. I had concerns when we passed the mask mandate 2 weeks ago or whatever I said it didn't make sense to me that we were not requiring a mask for the spectators. But at the time, with everything going on, I chose not to push the issue at that time. It was essential, in my opinion, to get a mask mandate put through on the school. That was on the table instead of trying to amend it. So I fully believe that we should, at this time, require masks on all spectators in our buildings. The argument that they're 6 feet distance, or could be, well, we're 6 feet distance here at this meeting here too. Pick and choose when is it 6 feet, when isn't, everything else doesn't work. So in my opinion, if we're gonna have a mask mandate, we need to follow it that way. Now, the other part of it is, though, does it make sense for us to require our students participating in Minnesota State High School League activities to be doing different than any other school and those coming into our school? Last year, masks were required on the players in the Minnesota State High School League rules. And I personally think it would be much simpler to follow Minnesota State High School League rules regarding masking indoors and outdoors on the school activity, into being part of that. But we do control the spectator, and I'm 100% behind requiring masking for now on all spectators in our building for sports. Pam, got some valid points. We got time to go and study that more before the winter season, sports season. If we come up with a good way that we can determine when people are 6 feet socially distanced, I'd certainly be open to talking about it. What I find, enough on that now, what I find confusing here is county COVID numbers and our proposed criteria for timelines, removing face coverings. And the criteria here is based on new cases per 10,000 persons in the past 7 days. And part of the confusion for me, and I assume for many people, is last year when we saw the COVID numbers, they were for 14 days per 10,000 people. So we're thinking about numbers from a year ago, and this, and it's confusing. But for me, I simplified it real easily when I looked here. If we're looking at high transmissions, and it's new cases per 100,000 people in the past 7 days, the low end of what, 100. The low on 100 really converts into 20 based on last year. What you're going to have to do is take the 100 and double it to 200. So you got 14 days worth. And then you got to divide it by 10 to get back down to 10,000. And that gets you a number similar to what it was last year. Now there's going to be variations from week to week, but if you had 2 weeks of the same thing and you're only using one of those weeks, you're going to get this number for 100,000. So I like that we have a criteria here. I'm going back to last year's numbers. If we could get the 14-day 10,000 number down to 20, would I be okay getting rid of the masks right then and there? And I think I maybe could. So I'm okay with working this number up or down a little bit to maybe, but I'm glad we got something here to look at right now. We shouldn't have to fight this battle every time at a board meeting. Let's get a criteria out there. Let's use it. And let's go with it. I'm personally glad that we went through the mask mandate at our last meeting. I'm glad we are finally getting the criteria out here to work with. Are these the right numbers or aren't they for when we come back for removing the face coverings? It's close to me. I would be open to looking at a little bit higher number, but like I say, it's extremely confusing because I'm trying to use last year's numbers and convert that into this chart. Once I finally got that thing figured out, how to get to the numbers we were using last year, we were major concerns at 40 and 50 per 10,000 for 2 weeks. And right here now, a high transmission is anything 100 on 100,000, which is, if I'm doing my math right, 20 per 10,000 for 2 weeks. And at that point, we were feeling really good about the way that COVID was going on the direction it was. We've been on the upswing, we need to get back. So I ran it on way too long. Like I say, I will support this criteria, but I think it should be looked at. I think we should look at the masking indoor for other things in our district too, if we can social distance. That's a good winter project or get to or whatever, but we got to act today for what we can do now. I think we should mask all spectators indoors currently, and we should follow state high school league rules of masking on all our students that are participating. Thank you.
So what I'm hearing you saying though is make the math equal to what we've been using in the past.
Equal for who?
I mean, comparing apples to apples. Like, it's hard to look at this chart because it's so different than the charts we've used in the past.
I'm gonna get to something compare similar to what we had last year, or get that in, just have everybody get it in their mind. What are we actually looking at?
The same math.
In comparison, so
Yeah.
And you can't do an exact conversion because the numbers vary every week. But I got a very good average number for myself to use on COVID count for a 2-week period. The only drawback of it is that's 2-week-old data by the time we got it last year. And to address Jim's concern on projected, I thought the projected numbers were county using more current numbers, projecting out and trying to get ahead of that 2-week delay is what we were doing last year. Whether that's in this stuff we're getting from the county now, I don't know. But last year, the projected number was using current numbers, but not waiting for the state or whoever to put out their numbers that were 2 weeks old. It was giving us a heads up ahead of time.
Holly, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm with you, Arlen. When we made the decision at the last meeting, I had like, wait a minute, we just said everybody else has to wear a mask, except for the people that come into the building at night. It made no sense to me. So I'm glad we're readdressing it, and I'm glad that we're having an honest conversation about numbers and about case rates. But what we haven't mentioned is the Delta variant. Is much more transmissible to children than the variant we were dealing with last year. So I don't know if we can compare apples to apples because we're dealing with a whole new strain of the virus. And that is not something that we would look at how we did it last year. I would prefer to go with the COVID team's push and recommendation for how we look at it this year. If the strain was the exact same and we were dealing with COVID, whatever it was last year, that's different, but we're not. So if the COVID team is recommending that we move in a different direction in terms of looking at what's high, what's medium, what's low, I don't know if that's part of the factoring. I'm just assuming it is. So maybe we can get some clarification on why they want it that way instead of us agreeing to change it into something without understanding. Because personally, when we started school last year, we were still quite hesitant about what it could turn into. Well, we have now seen what it can turn into. And I would hate for us to make a decision based on how we did it last year for this year. So I'm all for supporting what the COVID team recommends, but with a deeper understanding of what that actually means in terms of why they're looking at. Does that make sense?
Can you address that right now?
Yeah, and I said this last spring too, and I think it expresses the frustration that all of us are sharing, not only in this room, but everywhere. The numbers are completely arbitrary and subjective. So, and that goes with the COVID rates last year, because we were using those rates to determine if we should be in person or hybrid or online only. And I think the same is true for CDC's metrics, this time around too. I mean, when it comes down to it, we really don't know what an acceptable positivity rate is, for example, or what an acceptable 7-day case rate is, for the county, and we just don't know. And so I know the COVID response team really relied on the metrics that the CDC is using, which are twofold. It's a 7-day case rate per 100,000 people, and then also the positivity rate. There are pluses and minuses to both, but again, they're both completely arbitrary. There is no right answer. So the COVID response team, looked at those 4 different categories and then, came forth with the recommendation. So I wish I knew we had the right answer, but it's impossible to really know for sure. If I could just add one more thing, I'm jumping ahead of Jim. But the one concern I have about the criteria was expressed by, I think, a parent in the district or somebody who sent us an email, recently. And, when will it be low enough to take off our masks? If we follow this criteria for the next year or two, are we always going to be wearing masks? Well, I sure hope that's not the case. And so That's why I think we should review this criteria, regardless of what we decide tonight, we should review the criteria and timeline, see what other schools are doing, look at the school transmissions, and then adjust this as we go. Because I think we've only been, only twice or something, under the rate high, for quite a period of time. So anyway, sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to jump in front of you.
Yeah, you did, but okay. I'll just, I'm not an doctor or am I in the medical field, but I think the flu of 1918 is here forever. I think as a society, we are going to probably looking at having some type of COVID around the rest of many of our lives. So we're learning about it, trying to figure it out. In my estimation, that's just a guess, it's never going to go away as long as I'm around. Secondly, you mentioned the other school districts in Big Nine, no other athletes in indoor events are masked while participating, I believe.
Correct.
Do you know what the other school districts are doing regarding their participants or spectators?
I don't know that offhand.
That's something we could bring back to another meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Go
what we're
forward, because, I mean, to me, I get the idea, we're gonna mask our students, but everybody else not sitting there, walking in the door, COVID leaves at 3:15, everybody else coming in can go without the mask. But I get I just assume not anybody wear a mask and everybody's smart enough to stay away from each other, which I think people are starting to smart up. But to me, it looks like a week ago, we met, so 8 days ago, we put that in with the understanding spectators, no masks, recommended, not required. Students now required. We're flip-flopping it, meaning, well, we gotta have, somebody's gotta wear a mask, let's make the participants wear a mask, not the athletes. So it just doesn't seem even right, whatever we decide tonight, it's the right thing. I totally agree with students that the participants in whatever high school league thing that they're participating in, not have a mask, or they gotta wear it when they go to other schools then, because we require it. Other schools get required to wear it here. So, don't know if there's a definite best answer or best solution tonight, but we got to come up with something.
And by the way, if I could add one thing, the one thing that's happened in the meantime, from when we originally came up with the policy to now, is what happened in Albert Lee, where they did not require masks. They started school earlier than we did, and there, at least a week ago, there were over 40 kids who tested positive for COVID. There were over 300 who were quarantined. And so I think that gets to Holly's point in terms of this Delta variant and how it spreads. And so I think that caused us to reflect on what our policy was. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it's really up to the board to decide whatever the board wants to do, but I know that was a factor.
Yeah, if I could go back to this proposed criteria, timelines for removing face covering requirements. Doing the math in my head, and I'm trying to get back to last year's numbers. And doing class for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. I'm just that one greater than 10. 10 times 2 is 20, divided by 10 gives you last year's case rate of 2 for a 14-day case rate, comparable to a 2 last year and a 14-day case rate per 10,000. To me, that seems very, very low. On the high end of that moderate transmission age range, there's 50 times 2 is 100 to get to 2 weeks worth of transmission. Divided by 10 gives you 10. So somewhere between 2 and 10, using last year's criteria, 14-day per 10,000 case rate is what that moderate transmission is. Mass. that's picking numbers, but I like the criteria, but I think that we're a little bit over, I would like to see the mask come off a little bit earlier, if that's the right word. So maybe you phase 1 is high, phase 2 substantial, phase 3 moderate, and forget the low.
Well,
Into phase. Moderate would be phase 1 is what I'm looking at.
it has the suggested criteria says when the county drops our policy is written exactly what you're describing. So, you know, if we're at high now, if we're in moderation for 3 consecutive weeks, then we move down a phase.
It wasn't clear on here where phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 were. It only said that related to phase 1, when the county drops down to low transmission, which is 0, 10.
Yeah, then the elementary kids
Will drop down to phase 1. So to me, that's phase 1. So phase then in the moderate, phase 1 is in low. Now I'm trying to run the numbers up, and we're in a high transmission. Phase 3 already when we're at substantial. So I'm a little confused on those phases.
To describe it the way I've written, or phrase, there's an easy way for us to describe it. You know, I could certainly talk to Ann Robertson to see if she could work it in a different way. Really, I could, you know, the moderate transmission is essentially phase 2. Low transmission. So if we got transmission, no, well, that's the word. And for 3 weeks, we were.
I'm just saying, substantial are the same thing.
Right, as far as masking.
So,
Yeah.
So low and moderate's the same.
no, low's got phase 1, phase 2 is moderate, phase 3 is substantial and high.
Right.
That's balance, and I would agree with Arlen on that. It's confusing because you have 4 transmission levels with only 3 phases.
What we could do is say more substantial transmission, if you want it. You know,
Well,
if you're okay with these numbers.
I would suggest put the phase after what you call the highest transmission and say phase substantial transmission. Well, I don't think there should be any, but that's my way I run my numbers. So.
Yeah, I think we.
But that would get it, instead of having 2 different tables, combine the name into both of them.
Yeah.
Higher substantial transmission and then put the phases there.
Well,
And Arlen, are you suggesting that with moderate transmission, we would go to phase 1? So basically there would only be 2 phases?
That's my gut right now tonight, suggesting phase 1 on moderate, phase 2 substantial, phase 3 high, and no phase on low. To me, if I'm working it right, nobody's disputed me how I'm trying to translate to last year's numbers. If we're down to 2 cases in the county over the last 14 days, or per 2 cases per 10,000 over the last 14 days in the county, I think I don't know if we've ever hit that low.
Well, right,
And
and
we
I
were
think,
without masks when we threw the masks away here back this summer. And I think we're still higher than that.
well, what I appreciate is the word you used earlier of flexibility, because we also have to look at this realistically. We're never gonna be 0. I think you're right. This is gonna be here for a long time. So are we really gonna expect a 0 number? No, but we're gonna know over time where our numbers are and what is a realistic expectation. So I think this is a great starting point, but I think we are gonna have to keep looking at this I think we should, whether we have an in-depth discussion on it or not every meeting, it should always be on our agenda, just like COVID was all last year. Because there will be things that we're gonna have to bring up and discuss and change and be flexible about, and realistic about. We don't know what the realistic expectations are going to be in 6 months, in 6 weeks. So I would really appreciate it if it could always be on the agenda. If we don't have anything to say, fine, but I think, all right, Jennifer, you're next, and then Holly.
I was just going to say that the substantial and high transmission rate is when it is recommended by Goodhue County CDC to have masking indoors at all times. Below that, it's not, they're saying that it's not necessarily necessary within buildings. So I agree with Arlen that I think we could probably go, maybe not tonight, but eventually, look at having no masks for moderate and low transmission, based on that. But definitely masking in all the buildings, substantial and high. That would simplify the plan a little bit, just to have the 2 phases rather than have 3. But for now, I do think that this is a good plan, something to start with. And as everyone has said, if we continue discussing this monthly, we can come up with something better. And COVID is always changing, and so we need to be able to be flexible and change things along with it. And I think that changing our plan for athletic events shows that we can be flexible and do that based on the needs. It's looking like we do not need to have our athletes masked, and I agree with that. But our athletic director and others on the team are asking that the spectators are masked, so that they do not have to worry about social distancing there, and for the safety of the students and for the spectators. And also, it just makes our policy, I think, more concrete and cohesive. As Arlen said, if we're doing it during the day, this is our policy in our school buildings all the time. And so I agree with that change. And 2 weeks ago, we had other things to discuss, so it makes sense to me that we bring it up now as we have more information and are looking into it. So I agree with both of these changes in the policy.
Holly.
Thank you. I concur, Jennifer, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. Now, last time when we met, we talked about when we were gonna revisit it. And it was gonna be done at the agenda committee. And then you were gonna bring it and put it on the board agenda, was my understanding.
Well, we talked about bringing the report back to this meeting.
Right,
At
from
the
the
last
agenda
board
committee
meeting we were at.
report.
The last board meeting we had, we talked about bringing a report back. And we didn't have this information at the agenda meeting.
No, but as far as revisiting it,
Oh.
you guys were gonna revisit it at the agenda committee meetings.
Going forward.
And then moving forward, you were gonna have something ready for us to discuss at the board meetings. So is that still something?
I think this will have to be something we discuss pretty much every time we meet.
Right, and that's what we had kind of decided, was that every agenda committee meeting, you were gonna discuss it, bring new information or old or whatever kind of information to the board, so, saying that we need to discuss it every meeting is, yes, because we've already discussed that we're gonna do it at the agenda meetings and bring it to the board. It's kind of what I wanted to remind us, is that's what we're already doing.
Okay. This was not ready at the last agenda meeting.
Okay,
So going forward, now I got you. Going forward, I thought you were saying at the last meeting we come up with this, why is your question tonight?
no,
Okay.
yes. Okay,
Yeah, I think my assumption, depending on the agenda committee meeting would be, I'll just assume that we're gonna be talking about these issues at every meeting. And then, we just kind of go from there. That's the easiest. So it'd be the learning plan, which would include quarantining, policy 808, and then the criteria. So it'd be very easy for me to rework this, combine a couple of things, maybe even give you a couple options. I hate doing that because it complicates things, but that might help with, streamlining discussion.
I think as a board, we're all gonna wanna know where we're fall. each scheduled board meeting, where these numbers fall.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's gonna be
that for sure.
a conversation at every future board meeting for summertime.
Yeah, it was basically in response to the notion that we spend so much time talking about this when we have other things we should be discussing. My feeling is, yes, we do have other things we need to be discussing and this.
Right.
So
I
if
agree.
we get it all organized and streamlined, we're ready to roll.
Yep, will do, well noted.
All right, so looking for a motion then. There's a recommendation on page 11 of our board book.
So moved.
The recommendation is to approve changes to policy 808 as presented and to adopt the criteria and timing for revoking the face coverings policy as presented. Moved by Polly, do I have a second?
I will second.
Jennifer seconds, any other discussion?
Just,
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna have a hard time. I guess first I wanna have a clarification, trying to read through that policy, what are the changes before we make the motion, or make the vote? I would rather see, and I don't know, the motion's on the floor, but I'd rather see something that we follow state high school league rules for our athletes. And that, unmasking, and we'll just take that variable out, but there's a motion on the floor, we either vote it up or down, I don't wanna try an amendment or anything else. I'm just putting that out there.
Why can't we try an amendment?
Well, it gets very complicated, but that's fine, people can do what they want, I just am not really in favor. I gotta look at that 808 again to see what it says, while we're getting ready to vote here, but, and the other one, the criteria, if we're taking mask off, doesn't seem to be in alignment with, I know with me and maybe with others, on when we finally can take the mask off and what the number is, so I'm just putting that out there. And we may have to go and revisit that with another vote at another meeting, and is it really needed to have that removal of the mask policy done at this meeting, or could it go in the next meeting? I'm just putting those thoughts out. I'll vote accordingly when I'm ready at the time.
So can we separate it into two? Is it
What?
too late to separate it into two?
Just have a discussion first. Missile High School League is what, he talks about it, but I have no idea what it is. What does Missile High School League recommends for their student participants?
Yeah, I don't know, they do not require masks.
Okay, they don't require, so does the motion to change the masking from participants, spectators in the stands wear them and athletes do not. Is that part of the motion? Yes or no?
Yes. And if we wanted, we could add per the Minnesota State High School League
I don't know, I'm
guidance.
not gonna say that because I don't know what it is and I'm not gonna guess that.
And then, if you don't mind, if I could respond to Arlen. The red line version of the policy changes, I believe, is included as an attachment. So you can kind of see what the recommended changes are. And then in terms of the criteria, it would not have to be approved tonight because it would be impossible for us to have 3 consecutive, readings in a different level before the next board meeting. So it doesn't have to be tonight. Motion's on the table, but.
How would we like to handle this?
So amendment would be, to amend, amendment could be as, only pick out those 2 specific things. So that's what amendment would be.
Prove it the way it is.
So how
Well,
do
you
we
want-
decide on an
You approve the
amendment?
way it is and you're approving the 808 policy.
Yep.
That were submitted there. We're not sure. We need to do that.
So can we change the motion to
Amend
have
the
it-
motion.
amend the motion to have it be to approve the changes to policy 808 and then have it be a separate motion for the criteria and timing so that if we don't have to vote on all of that at once.
I think you're best on the amendment to specific, amend what part of it, and then vote on the amendment, and then vote on the amended motion. So what the meaning is, if you don't want to approve the policy, you only do those 2 things tonight, you can do that and bring the policy back at another meeting, the rest of the policy. But that's what the
So
wish of
if
the
I were
people.
to amend it,
You amend the motion to say, as effective immediately, the students go without, student athletes indoors, don't need to wear it while participating, but on the bench they do, and spectators need to wear it. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Jennifer?
and it's combined with the,
But then there's other parts of the 808 that we may not want to finalize tonight. I don't know
But
what you want to do.
the criteria is not part of the 808.
When you
Correct.
The criteria and timing for revoking the face coverings, that's not part of 808.
We're not gonna,
The only other, right, that's not part of that, so.
we'll never get 3 weeks. With 2 weeks from now, we'll never have 3 weeks to, we could set it. What you all talked about as to phase 1, 2, or 3, move those into a better box so we all understand it at the next meeting.
Right.
Because we won't have 3 weeks of high, substantial, moderate before next week.
Sure.
Before 2 weeks.
The only other thing on policy 808 is deleting or adding the last component of that, is that correct? Or,
Right, as far as the exceptions.
Yes,
Mhm. Yeah, another
And
option, I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to Robert's Rules of Order. You know, I'm sure there's a provision where you can split, you know, a motion into two. I don't know what the ground rules are for that. Another possibility is just, if both just withdrew the motion and then we considered a different motion. That's probably not perfectly consistent with Robert's Rules of Order. Or we can just take a vote on this, and if it doesn't pass, as long as we agree that we can take up each one separately, then we should be okay. You know, the goal is to get a consensus of the board, you know, to make sure that we're giving everyone the opportunity.
I would like to withdraw the motion
Okay.
and start fresh.
that's fine with me, I'm okay with that.
All right, because you were a second on that motion. Okay.
And I don't know if it matters, but my Chromebook died, and so I'm trying to get into this one, so I'm not online, but since we're all here, I don't know if it matters. Just so you know, I'm not on the screen.
Right,
Can't
but we
get
can
into
hear
it.
you.
Thank you.
You're taking the minutes, so it should be noted.
Okay, we're crystal clear on this now?
We're crystal clear that we're
Motion-
gonna
the
get
motion
here.
has been withdrawn,
With,
and the second is withdrawn, agreed to withdraw it. So it's open again for any motion.
okay, so I'm looking for a motion on how we'd like to proceed. Jennifer made a suggestion, which I think is a good one.
So I guess I could make the motion that we approve the changes to policy 808 as presented.
I'll second that.
Isn't that just the original motion?
No, it
It's
was
just
both of
808.
them combined.
All right, I just want to make sure we're not,
No, it's different.
okay.
All
I
right.
just want to make sure.
Can you repeat that, Jennifer, please?
I would like to approve the changes to policy 808 as presented.
Motion made by Jennifer, seconded by Holly. Any other discussion? We're just 808. Yes, Arlen.
Clarify for me, does that mean the spectators will be wearing masks and that activity or athletes will not?
Yeah.
Thank you. I've been trying to sort my way through this mess and
Well, the
read 808 because it's approved and working so anyway, that's fine. I got clarity. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? Questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. All right. Now, do we want to tackle the criteria and timing for revoking the face coverings?
Yeah, if it's okay with the group, I'd like to check with this COVID response team, and we'll come up with a different recommendation 2 weeks from now.
All right, so that, we'll
Let's,
just leave that.
let's discuss it a little bit at the agenda meeting as Board Member Tower suggested.
Okay. Anything else on COVID-related topics?
Get rid of the mask. As soon as we can.
School board reports is the next item on our agenda. Does the finance committee have anything to share?
The finance committee met at the end of August. The same day we updated. Wasn't that our last meeting? Right, so there's nothing new. report.
Just got that report that's in there.
Yes.
Yes.
Please
You wanna look
refer
at
to the board packets.
I have it.
Anything else you'd like to highlight on that? No, okay. Operations committee, anything to highlight?
Our meeting was canceled for this evening. The last meeting was early August, and you've already reported on that.
Personnel committee, we did have, you will see our notes are in the board packet as well. We did meet this evening, just before the board meeting, to discuss a specific, we reviewed the hiring process that goes through our human resource program in light of a specific position that we are hiring for. So we reviewed the procedure on how that worked, and you will see more about that in 2 weeks at the next board meeting, because there will be a recommendation coming forward, more than likely, for a hiring position. But we wanted to make sure we're following the procedures, because that is something that we have tasked the superintendent with, is to make sure we're following the procedures. And so we reviewed that, and it's fine, yes.
Can I add to that?
For sure.
Okay, great. I wasn't able to attend the personnel committee meeting for an emergency reason. Therefore, I haven't gotten the nuts and bolts of what was discussed. So I'm not gonna say whether or not I agree that something will come forward or something won't come forward, because I don't know. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Fair enough. Legislative and policy committee?
We haven't met for a while. We had a meeting after our last meeting, so. And we worked on some policies, approved some stuff at the previous meeting there, and so nothing's, that I know, do you remember anything?
No, I think we delivered what we had to discuss at the last meeting.
Negotiations, we have a very, very busy September coming up. We've got a lot of meetings scheduled. We're well underway, and you should be hearing from us shortly on hopefully some tentative agreements. So that's exciting. Anything else?
I have the GCED
Okay.
update. It's
Yeah.
kind of a big one, so bear with me.
Okay.
Sherry just sent it to us today for this evening. As of right now, we have 120 students enrolled in Five Rivers Online. 10 of those students are part-time and the rest are full-time students. The board, the GCED board, approved opening up Five Rivers Online to outside districts. Meaning, if we do not fill up within Goodhue County Ed District, we can take applicants from outside the district. Those people that would opt to come into Five Rivers, say Bloomington or Owatonna, 100% of their ADM follows them. So that was the reason we went forward with approving that piece, to allowing other kids. The concern was, would they take a space from a child or an adolescent who from Red Wing or from Cannon wanted to have that space? Not likely, possible, but then we discussed at the board, we would have to look at numbers for teachers, and if we had to add a teacher to make room for more kids, that's a very viable option. So it doesn't strictly eliminate students from enrolling, but it gives us an option if we need to look at hiring another teacher to keep class sizes functional and kids able to get their needs met. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Can I just
Yes.
add, all three of my kids are with Five Rivers. The one it's taking, because we got her enrolled later, she's half and half. She'll do 2 of her honors classes here, and she'll do the rest with Five Rivers. We're just being patient and going with the flow and just but we had wonderful reviews from my children. And because wrapped up in the health industry, they always, in a pain clinic, they ask you rate your pain 1 to 10. So I use that 1 to 10 scale for everything. I go, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, what did you think about your first day of Five Rivers? Both of my kids that fully attended today, because my one didn't get to because we're scheduling her classes right now, they both rated it at an 8. I said, okay, what would you have rated your in-person school experience before? The one rated it a 6. My son, the youngest one, rated it a 3. We had really, and I was blown away by, and we're just kind of learning as it goes. But I really think that this Five Rivers, and I like the fact that we're opening up to, this might be something that we can really grab a hold onto and run with to be different from everybody else. So I was really, even I'm excited about school, and we all know how I felt about school beforehand, and so this completely changed. So that's why change is good. Change is good. We just need to be able to, and it's scary at first, but as long as we remain calm and patient, everything will be okay. And, we might end up liking something better than what we thought we would. So I just wanted to give that just a really good evaluation of Five Rivers from our perspective with 3 kids in there. And 3 different, so we've got elementary, middle, and then high school. So that was our perspective.
Thank you. So a little bit more, Jackie attended the meeting as well. As the business managers report, we're closing in on the fiscal year 21 and preparing for the audit, and the cash flow over there is solid for fiscal year 22.
Mhm.
Yep, it's in a solid place. That's one thing. MDE has encouraged districts to use their ESSER 3 funds, the 3 or 2?
3.
3, their ESSER 3 funds to help students recoup lost learning skills or lost learning time. And I don't know if we budgeted that in our work here in Red Wing. It's not a have to, it was a recommendation. But I seem to recall some of the summer boost money was used for students, and did students with IEPs attend summer boost? Do we know?
I'm sorry.
Did students with IEPs attend summer boost?
It was in conjunction with ESY, so I'm sure there were different circumstances depending on their IEP.
Okay. The MDE, Department of Ed, is also expecting every student with an IEP to have an IEP meeting before December 1st. This is extremely uncommon, but it's happening because schools want to give families a clear picture of where their child is in terms of learning gains or learning loss, and what needs to be made up, or how they would make that up, or what would the plan be moving forward. Typically, if you have 20 kids on your caseload, you would have 20 IEP meetings for the year. Now they will have 40 or 50, depending on if the IEP meeting is December 1st and their IEP meeting is within 2 weeks of that, you wouldn't have to do that one twice. So it wouldn't exactly be double, but it will be a lot more work for the special ed staff. And I'm not saying it's work that shouldn't happen. It should happen, but just to be mindful of that as we're talking about special education. Yes, Jim?
Can you, for the audience out listening, define what IEP means for them? And then you
Yes.
said some other acronym, SY or something.
Oh, sorry.
What
Yes,
those acronyms
IEP
mean for
is-
people?
For people who have a child with special needs or disability, it's an individualized education plan.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And ESY is on that IEP. If you look at what their goals are and what they should accomplish for the year, if those goals could be impacted in any way by loss of time in the summer, then the case manager and the team qualifies them for ESY, which is extended school year. So they get that extra time in the summer.
That's why people out there listening.
Yep, no, I think it's great, yeah, I think it's great.
We're so used to throwing acronyms around here that it's kind of nice just to share them. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jackie, was there anything else? We passed the mask mandate for the school, and it was kind of contentious because some people did not want to have a mask mandate over there, and some people recognized that they're in Red Wing and it would make sense to do what Red Wing is doing because we're so close. And because the population of students that are served over there are at a much higher risk for catching something or having immunocompromised situations or fighting infections. So the board approved it, I think it was 5-1. Yep, 5-1 to have a mask mandate over there to follow what Red Wing does in terms of how we move forward. There was one member who was not comfortable with the vaccination information and GCED pushing the language of people should get vaccinated. It's recommended. So instead of having that in the language of what we were adding, it's just a resource. If you want to know what CDC is advising on vaccinations, it's in this resource. It's just a link, but it's not GCED pushing what that message is about vaccinations because people were very sensitive to that, which I thought was a, good compromise. And they're going to continue to review data just like we do at our meetings. And I think that's it, Jackie, isn't it?
The only other thing on Sherry's update you didn't mention was the strategic plan.
Oh, yes, there was, the strategic plan was worked on this summer. Were you part of that, Kirsten?
It was.
Okay, so they're going to work on developing interventions in school districts to help students stay off of an IEP. So if a child's having trouble in any area of math, reading, writing, behavioral challenges, any of those things, schools throughout Goodhue County Ed are going to be working on improving their intervention or their strategies to work with kids who are struggling so that they don't end up on an IEP. Right now, there's a big gap. There's lots of things going on in the classrooms and there's lots of moving parts, but sometimes we miss a piece for kids and they end up going to special education and it might not be the case. So we have a higher disproportionate number of students who are African American on IEPs in Goodhue County, and that really needs to be looked at. And so this is one of the ways that Goodhue County Ed District is taking an initiative to really look at how we're working with kids in the school buildings to keep them there and to work with them in a way that they're successful, instead of looking at it from a deficit model. They can't, they won't, they aren't. What can they do? How can we help them do that better? So I like that. Being better at communicating is, what's her name? Don't tell me. Ann Robertson, is she gonna be working with them at all or strictly ours?
Currently, it's strictly ours, but of course, there's some programs at GCD that are directly related to our work, so there may be some stories there.
Okay. And then the other thing was annual onboarding of new staff. So right now, all of the administrators in all of Goodhue County have gotten the same onboarding training from GCED, which I highly recommend anybody sit in on. And then moving forward, just new staff. But it was like a start fresh this summer with introducing, especially with Five Rivers coming to the table. So it was a big, long meeting. Any questions?
No, but I really appreciate the thorough update. That's great to know what they're doing.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was nice to move some things in the right direction.
Awesome. Are there any other committees to report on? All right, seeing none, administrative reports, Superintendent Anderson.
I'll touch upon a few of the topics in the report. Professional Development Week was outstanding. I think it was the best week of training that we've had here perhaps forever. And it was highlighted by some presenters who really focused on equity. Jess will give a presentation here in a couple of weeks, and so I won't go into details. She can explain on that later. Homecoming starts on September 13th. And so we're thrilled that we can get back to some sense of normalcy, albeit with masks, but full range of activities starting on Monday. So we're excited about offering that. High school will be posting some of this information as far as what's happening when very soon. It wasn't posted as of this morning because they're making some finer adjustments, but you'll like the schedule. There's no doubt. Veterans Day program. For many years, we've been able to host the annual Veterans Day program. When asked earlier in August about this program, we didn't have the mask requirement. I really didn't want over 1,000 kids in our gym, along with maybe 200 visitors unmasked. And so at that time I said, no, it won't work out for this November. Of course, now we have face coverings that are required. So I think it is a possibility if we can do some good social distancing. And so Kristen Bray did reach out to the group that sponsored that. And we'll either have it here in the high school or it'll be at the Armory. So they're working on some of those details, but I wanted to give you an update about that. Another item has to do with the open forum that we're going to have here at the end of September. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm assuming that the sole topic for discussion during the forum relates to planned use of Jefferson School.
We have a conflict already because the minutes show September 27th and your report says September 20th.
Oh, my fault. It should be the 27th. Yeah, thank you. That's the workshop, the night of the workshop. So we'll have this open forum and then we'll talk about some workshop topics. So it sounds, I can tell from everyone's reactions that that's kind of where we're all thinking that. I just wanted to be sure. Every Hand Joined will become part of youth outreach. That is either official now or will be within the next few days. And so they'll be taking over a lot of the work in terms of parent engagement, data mart work, and those kinds of things. So I just wanted to let you know about that. If you want youth outreach to come to give a presentation, we can certainly do so we can better understand their mission and goals.
As I was reading through that, could you expound a little bit on parent permission and what youth outreach is going to be looking towards?
Yeah, so we have the data mart that's always been housed by Every Hand Joined in the past. Now it'll be under the umbrella of youth outreach, but I think we have a good umbrella. Even though it's under the umbrella of youth outreach, I3 Works is the one who's controlling the data. I3 Works is a consulting company that does technology work for the school district and in the past for Every Hand Joined, and now they're helping out youth outreach. So that data mart's going to be controlled by I3 Works. Youth outreach will be just like the other community partners, like the Prairie Island Indian community, Hispanic outreach, and some others. And so they'll still need to get the parent authorization forms so they can access data about the students they serve. So I think that's a really good arrangement. I was really concerned at first because you don't want one group acting in two different roles. So that's why I3 Works will control the data mart.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, good. The Community Education Recreation Fall Brochure has been issued and it's included as an extra for the meeting tonight. And then we did conduct our at least yearly consultation with our non-public schools to go over a variety of things like nursing services, transportation, title allotments, and those kinds of things. And it's a good reminder that we're all on the same team. We all want all of our kids to succeed. And so it's nice to work with them. They do great work, and I think we're good partners. That's all I have.
Can we just revisit that time on the open forum about Jefferson School? We discussed 6 to 7 and then have the workshop following that. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm assuming that there'll be a tour before the 6 o'clock start. And so I'm thinking maybe around 5:30 if community members want to walk through the building just to familiarize themselves with what it looks like. And then we'll have the 6 o'clock meeting that'll last probably about 45 minutes. So we have a little break before the board meeting or before the board workshop.
And we're gonna have that at Jefferson.
That's the plan.
Okay. And is that gonna be listed out somewhere, like maybe on our website, the school website, or, you know, like a link to that, like for the agenda that night so the public can know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it'll be posted as an open forum along with, you know, the location and what we're planning to discuss.
Okay. Any questions for the superintendent on his report? All right, the next item is the consent agenda. There are a lot of things listed under the consent agenda with the minutes, the claims, new hires, resignations, retirements, activity advisors, MOUs, leases, and extracurricular assignments. Does anybody have anything they'd like to pull or change from the consent agenda? I have one question under activity advisors, number 11, so I'll pull that. Anything else?
Well, I guess I got a question on the MOU on Mr. Mars.
I was gonna ask for that same
I
one.
think we
Do you want to pull that one?
So
Yeah,
number
let's just
8,
discuss that one, yeah, because that,
okay, any others?
Did that MOU poll include all 3 steps?
Yes,
Okay, great.
yep.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so we will vote on the consent agenda minus number 8 and number 11. Do I have a motion?
I'll move it.
Arlen made the motion to approve the consent agenda minus numbers 8 and 11. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Holly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, consent agenda carries. All right, let's discuss number 8, the MOUs.
Yeah, there are 3 MOUs with employees that are recommended. 2 of them were for previous teachers of the district, Brittany Keel and Jill Rohan. They've both taken administrative positions, Brittany in Red Wing, and as an early childhood director, and then Jill Rohan for the Victory County Ed District as a coordinator for 2 other school districts. So what we've done in the past is that we have typically allowed teachers, as per their contract, to put in for up to a 3-year extended leave of absence. And they both requested the full 3 years if it's going to a different role within a school district. So we would not allow one of them to be, or a teacher to get an extended leave of absence to be a teacher in Brooklyn Center, for example, because it's another teaching position. But we have allowed it in the past for administrative positions. And so I thought it would be prudent to at least memorialize that in an actual memorandum of understanding with a clear indication that it's not setting past practice. And so everyone has to agree to that. So that's for the 2. Dan Mars had put in for an extended leave of absence this past spring, I believe, or early summer. I can't remember the exact timing. He had a change of heart in terms of what he was planning to do. And so he accepted a position in another school district and, or in GCD actually, as a K-12 music teacher. And so the recommendation is to approve the MOU, or to approve the MOU that would enable him to return if he so chooses.
So my question, I thought there was, I didn't take time to look back, and I could be mistaken here. I thought he did a leave of absence because he's going into another field. That has changed then?
Correct.
Because he's now he's not quite going to another school district, but he's going to a school organization that has ties to Reading, which is unusual.
Yeah, through GCD. And that's the reason for the MOU is that first it's the situation's different than what was originally planned. And it felt like to us that it was a very unique circumstances. You know, we're right in the middle of COVID, people are changing their plans. GCD really needed a K-12 music teacher. They posted, couldn't find anyone. You know, Dan was available. And so we thought those circumstances made it unique. And again, we don't want to open the door to everyone to just try out a different teaching position elsewhere. That would be a mistake. But we thought that they were very unique circumstances in this case.
Did you listed past practice as a concern in the other two MOUs? Is that spelled out
It is,
specifically?
yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
So,
I'd rather, just talk about it than have to pull it. I'd rather. do
Oh,
that.
yeah, no, this makes good sense.
yeah, and so when we voted on this at GCED, on their new teachers, those three people popped up that they were pulling in, and I asked at the meeting how it came about, but I didn't know that Red Wing in past practice had done that for people going into an administrative position. Is Mr. Mars a 1 year or a 3 year?
2 year.
Yeah, 2 year
2 years?
extended leave veterans. Yeah, so he cannot come back before that 2-year period. But if we approve this MOU, then he could come back after 2 years. And still, maintain some of his seniority rights and those kinds of things.
Okay.
And the reason they're, for the MOU, it's in the teacher's contract, that they have this up to 3 years if they compete, go to a competing school district or another school district, they go there, they waive their
Right,
chance to come back.
right, exactly.
So the MOU is needed for that. I get that.
Yeah, if, let's say if Dan had taken a job in, again, Brooklyn Center, use that as an example, then we would not be recommending this. But in this case, it's helping out our strategic partner at GCED. He will actually be working with Red Wing students mostly, and so that's helped explain the exception.
Okay.
And that position of his has been filled,
Correct.
the one that he vacated.
Right.
Right, so it didn't leave us in a position of, oh,
Talking about.
Correct.
yeah, that was kind of my big, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right, anything else on number 8?
No.
Should we vote on that first before we move on?
Sure, I'll make a motion to do number 8, the 3 MOUs.
Second. Seconded by Holly. Any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries. I just had a question on number 11. I'm looking at the activities advisors.
That's the sheet, by the way.
Yes, it is kind of buried in there. It's right before 104. The only thing I have a question about, so we just hired a communications director, brand spanking new to the district in terms of creating that position. And then I look at the student newspaper advisor, and I'm just wondering, would it ever make sense to have a communications director be in charge of that, or no? I mean, is it completely different?
Can I answer this?
Yes.
I caught the error on here when I opened it up. Our communications person is in that role, and it is part of her job description.
So that, I kind of thought so that's why I brought the question up. So then the activities person, we can delete that line then?
Yep, it's the same person.
Right, so
Yep.
they're not getting paid an extra $21.40,
Correct.
so it's absorbed in
It
their salary.
was included in the job description for the communications.
Which I
person.
thought did, so that's why I was confused. Okay, good, so,
I just emailed the 2 gals on that.
okay, thank you. Yes, Arlen.
I thought that was in the job description that it was, they would do that, but it was an extra pay besides, but they would fill that position. I did not take it that way, but if I'm wrong, that's fine.
I like that idea.
Yeah, the way the budget was presented was that it would absorb that stipend.
Okay. Because it's part of the job. Okay,
So we're
good,
voting to approve this without that person in that position?
correct, so we'll have to strike the student
Somebody would have to
newspaper
make a motion
advisor.
that way?
So I'll look for a motion then to accept the activities advisors minus the student newspaper advisor. I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jim.
Pulling teeth there.
I know. Any other questions or comments? All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, donations and grants.
There are 3 donations from Jeannie Eilers for $50 for the summer food service. Youth outreach for $450 for mental health matters seminar. And the Mental Health Coalition of Goodhue County for the same mental health matters seminar. Once again, we appreciate the donations to serve our students.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the 3 donations with a comment.
Yes, sir.
I second. Oh, did you say second? Good, go for it.
Motion made by Jim, seconded by Jennifer. Your comment, sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For some of us that have been here a long time, Mr. Derricks, Dick Beach was a teacher and coach here in Revoking High School for a number of years. And Holly might have remembered him too. Maybe Jennifer? Nikki?
Nope.
Okay. I won't stretch it too far. But it's very nice that the summer food in honor of Mr. Beach. And the other 2, mental health matters seminar with our Miss Minnesota, Red Wing graduate. So thank you very much for those generous donations.
And because it's a resolution, we do have to take a roll call vote to approve that. So I will begin with Ms. Tower.
Aye.
Ms. Tift.
Aye.
Mr. Bryant.
Aye.
Mr. Derricks.
Aye.
Ms. Buck.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, that passes 6-0. All right. Review of first day of school.
I'll just briefly go over some of the issues and I'll be available for questions. We'll start at the high school. Of course, Mr. Nemenich expressed that it was a rocky start because of Janet death. So there are some other, the biggest issues at the high school included some technology issues because this was the first time that the kids were issued Chromebooks at school on a school day. So I know there were long lines. There were a lot of people who thought they're going to get a new Chromebook, even though they had an old Chromebook at home, those kinds of things. We also are implementing a new schedule at the high school, and there are 2 new schedules, one for 7th and 8th graders and one for the others. So there were a lot of questions about that. That would happen in any year. And so I know they're sorting through that. And then, of course, with Isaac Matzik's resignation, because he took a different job, we are short an assistant principal for now. Hopefully that'll take care of itself in a couple of weeks. But right now it's George and Jay who are overseeing, the whole high school, which has over 1,000 kids. So it's quite the task. So like George said, it was a rocky start, but he's very confident in how things will sort out here. And so am I. Elementary schools, I think, went really well in terms of kind of the structure of having the K-6 schools, 3 of them. School attendance zones, in the end, worked out fine. I know there are a lot of parents who had to make other arrangements because they might live in one school attendance zone, whereas their ex-spouse lives in a different one, or maybe their daycare is, and so they have to juggle some arrangements there. But almost every child showed up at the right school, and that's what we're really worried about, to be honest with you, because that can be really hard on the kids if they have to be transported somewhere else. That leads me to transportation. I've lost a lot of sleep over the last couple of weeks, waiting to see what would transpire, and it went much, much better than I thought. Terry Johnson explained that it was a typical first day experience, even though we completely changed our transportation. We took Jefferson out, we have a 2-tier system, new starting and ending times. So, obviously there were buses late, but we get that every year. And they're making adjustments to the schedule. They're also hoping to relieve some of the crowding on one of the Burnside buses. So I think they'll be shifting some kids around. I'm sure you'll hear about that in terms of what buses they take and the time for pickup and those kinds of things. So in a nutshell, those are some of the significant issues that we've experienced. Our principals, however, wanted me to make sure to share that it was a great day. So the kids were excited to be here, at all levels. I was at Sunnyside and Twin Bluff today, and they're wearing masks, but you could tell that they were happy to be there. They're excited to see their teachers, and that's what we want. So do you have any questions about the first day or anything related?
Brian.
Maybe, two questions really, maybe more of a comment. What time does GCED start their school day?
Oh, I don't know.
Is it early?
Yeah, it's early. It's, right before 8, maybe. It's closer to our elementary time.
Do GCED kids ride their regular buses?
Yes.
Okay. I saw a bus coming up into the high school at 7:45 this morning, thinking, what, the elementary was starting earlier, but then they might have been dropping somebody off at GCED.
Yeah, I think they run a couple of their own routes, general ed routes and special ed routes, but sometimes we share students, and I think that's what Jeff
And
is.
I didn't expect a bus to be going up towards the high school at 7:45 when I'm coming up 21.
Yeah, they'd be
But
the
we're
River Bluff.
Going out to the middle school and the Sunnyside and Burnside and then coming up later here. So, okay, that could be it.
Yeah, and again, with transportation, I don't know if you've read the newspapers, but Stillwater, for example, has a lot of struggles because they're 20 routes down because they just don't have enough drivers.
St. Paul.
St. Paul has
We're
other issues.
76 drivers short.
Wow. In Minneapolis, I know had issues, so thankfully, First Student provided enough drivers. It was not an easy transition, but for this year, it was probably a smart move to have a 2-tier system. Hopefully, we can look at that this fall for the following year, see if we could possibly go back to something different. But we didn't have the same troubles that a lot of really reputable school districts have had with transportation.
Okay.
Any other questions or? It was a great day in Red Wing.
A lot of great first day pictures out there on social media. It's lovely to see. Way to go. ESSER 3 funds. Jackie.
Right. So in your packet, you have both a summary of the community needs assessment that Jess Whitcomb prepared, and then the itemized spending plan for the part of our ESSER 3 budget that is not reserved for learning recovery. So when Holly mentioned that we should reserve some for the special ed learning recovery, that's another piece of the budget that isn't presented tonight. That's the $421,000 that's reserved for that purpose, not just for special ed, but for all students for learning recovery. The plan was, or the requirements of this were different than ESSERs 1 and 2. There were strict guidelines we had to follow in order to apply for the funds. The first one was to have public comment on our return to in-person learning plan. We did that in June, followed up by meetings with community members on what our needs were. And that was what Jess did in July. And then we put a budget together, which we're presenting for your review tonight. We'll finish up the application and get it submitted to the Department of Ed for final approval here it's due the 1st of October. So I'll just ask, are there any questions?
Can you explain the cafeteria cameras for me?
I can.
Go ahead.
Of course, these are for the high school, and the concern is that kids are not wearing masks when they're eating. Of course, they're at, tables. And so the concern is if there was somebody with COVID at one of the tables, we would like to notify kids at that table. They don't have to quarantine because we don't have that at high school level, but we thought we would at least owe it to the parents and the kids so that they knew that at least at their table there was somebody with COVID. It was a struggle last year to identify who those people are because kids aren't going to remember who they sat at lunch with 2 days earlier. And so the recommendation from the high school was actually add some cameras so that we can easily identify kids, so that we can do the voluntary contact tracing.
So those will be recorded and kept for a while?
Yeah, just like all of our security footage.
Okay.
And so the thinking is that if there's an issue at one of the tables, somebody has it, then the high school admin will review the table to identify who the kids are, and then let our COVID team follow the parents. And again, it's a voluntary thing, but we do encourage parents to really closely monitor for symptoms of COVID, because, you know, if they have the symptoms, then they have to stay home. But it's a voluntary quarantine if they're just exposed.
I'm also curious about the mental health while at work. Is that to pay for like a mental health professional there? Okay,
Yes,
awesome.
yeah, if approved, we kind of contact health partners too.
Okay. Arlen, you're in queue.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking for a little clarification. We got, for the 21-22 school year for Five Rivers Online, $350,000, and for 22-23, another $300,000. Is my understanding Five Rivers Online should be able to run on its own with the revenues that we bring in on the students that are going into it. So I'm a little confused why all of a sudden this is gonna cost us $650,000 over the next 2 years.
It's a way to pay for that service. So we're still getting the money. And so if you just look at Five Rivers Online, the goal is to have the revenue pay for the expenses. But by including it in the allocation, that will help the general fund.
But
So-
I'm still confused, because if it's gonna come in from the students, what are you using ESSER money for? ESSER money, are we gonna get the ESSER money back then when the students pay for it from their tuition? What we get from the state and the,
Okay, can I take a stab at it?
yeah, sure, I'm looking for a good stat that I can understand.
All right, so GCED as an entity cannot receive general education aid. So any students attending Five Rivers Online, the general education aid will go to their resident district, like Red Wing, like a normal general education student. Then, when the year is said and done, GCED is gonna look at, okay, how many students attended from which districts, and divvy up the costs. So we're reserving ESSER funds for the first couple of years to help us pay for those costs of the program, allowing us to keep the gen ed revenue in the unreserved general fund for other purposes. Now, will it be 350,000 or 300,000? I don't know that yet. It was just a stab to reserve some money just in case we needed it for that.
This doesn't sound, it sounds absurd to me, this whole thing. It was supposed to pay its own way. Now we're stashing COVID ESSER funds or whatever to go and put this thing on, but it isn't. And we're gonna try to play accounting games to get the money back another way. I just don't understand it. I'm lost on it. I don't really like it.
I mean, Arlen brings up a good point there. You had me until you said, well, we're gonna just divvy up the cost. Well, every student comes with an ADM. So that dollar's gotta come no matter what. So I don't know what we're divvying up, because if they get 10,500 per kid from one school, maybe is every school different that they're paying for the ADM? But it should be 100%.
Right.
ADM, where they're also just not paying GCED, they're paying a portion based upon the number of students they have there. So I agree with, I'm confused too as to why are we dividing up the cost when we know what the dollars are per student coming in?
Yeah, they're coming into us. So either way, we either have to pay them the full ADM back, or we pay them a share of the cost, because the money's coming to us. So we gotta get it to them somehow.
So it comes to us, and it goes back, we pay them.
We pay them. So
What happens if their
we-
costs are above that ADM number?
the agreement with the member districts right now is we will pay the above costs. But we'll also pay the below cost if it comes in below the ADM.
So who's the board? Their board's monitoring what their costs are,
Yes,
and you're monitoring both costs, both books for us and GCED.
trying to, yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because that just kind of what he was talking about, getting money for students, even if they go over to the Five Rivers. Now, since our 3 children in the district, we also get money for them being Native American, don't we too? Or, because that's why I have to sign up paperwork when they first
Yes.
enter the district, right?
Well,
I mean, I just had to do it again.
no, they would now count on GCED's Mars file as Native American and
So not Red Wing Public District, right? So GCED gets that portion of it, but Red Wing still gets?
GCED does not have enough students yet to qualify for Native American funding.
Okay,
But Red Wing would get the state money.
but not the federal.
Correct. Not
So where does the
Native
federal go?
American. Huh?
Where does the federal go then?
We just don't get that allocation, the federal feds keep it.
You know what I think would be really helpful, maybe at the next board meeting or the next finance committee meeting or both, would be to have like a rough estimate showing how the revenues are coming in, like the Red Wing, and how the costs are allocated, because I think that would answer a lot of the questions.
And it's quite complicated because the revenue coming in may not be new revenue for us, because it may be students who were here last year who are now over there. So that's why we're putting money aside for what could be an increased cost. The only way it comes out cost neutral is if it's a new student or a student we brought back from online school that we're now getting the aid for.
And I think that's a good point. Finance committee bring it back there, because I don't want to all of a sudden pay a bill, we don't know what we're going to be paying.
Right.
Because all of a sudden, we need this much money because whatever, we budget ours, so let's figure out what their budget.
Yeah, and they have budgets prepared for different levels of students. We're just.
Hope if that's okay with the finance chair to bring it back at that meeting.
It is okay, and also from the GCED chair perspective, I'm the only, like, not the chair of that, but like representative for us. It's complex, yet for me to simplify it, somehow we have to pay for the students over there from Red Wing. So whether we pay directly from the general fund or we put money over into the ESSER funds or save money that way, either way, we have to pay for our kids to go over there. It doesn't, it just doesn't, like, it's not in their backpack when they go there. Like, here's my, 10 grand.
But we get 10, let's say we get 10,000, also we get a bill for 13 for over there.
Right, so that's what,
unexpected.
it is unexpected, and that's something that the board is supposed to be, when I talked about earlier, adding another teacher. Is it going to be worth the benefit if we ask the outside districts or we allow outside districts to come in? So it's an unknown, but I'm glad that you want to bring it back to the finance committee so that we stay on top of it. Kind of like maybe another spreadsheet like we're doing with how we're spending our budget, kind of also tracking. That's
Is that okay? Does that help you out, Alan?
No, I'm gonna go and say it again if I get a chance.
No, let's let Sherry talk.
Okay, Sherry's on the call and
Yeah.
she would like to
Try.
to explain it. Go ahead, Sherry.
Good evening, everyone. I will give it a shot. So as Jackie mentioned, an education district cannot receive general education revenue. So any student we enroll, that revenue goes to their resident district, not where they may have been open enrolled, but to their resident district. So for instance, if you had students open enrolled to another one of my members, and now if they're enrolled in 5RO, that revenue is going to come back to you. Just a little aside, I do think we're at the right number for Native American to capture that money as of today. So I just add that in. So today we ended our first day. We ended with 134 students, 94 of which are secondary, 41 are elementary. I don't know what the number will be tomorrow. It has been a very busy day. So with all of my districts receive a different amount of revenue per child because it's based on their tax capacity in their districts, their referendums, all of those other factors, and maybe even what programs they might qualify for based on free and reduced and other pieces. But based on the low estimate we chose for that ADM, we would bring in about 1.1 million. Our expenses right now are about 750,000. So there'd be 355,000 back. That would then go back to my members. So we are providing this program. How I'm really trying to explain it to staff is it's not as if you are sending your students away. It's as if you have another high school and another elementary option for your own students. They're still your students. They're still my students. It's just another option for them. My member districts, those students are being educated at cost. So there's no, the only administrator cost on that program is our principal cost. So it is strictly at cost. If we have students from outside our membership, outside of the Joint Powers Agreement, we would retain the full ADM for them. So there's a balance because we want to make sure we have room for any students within our county, but we also want to make this feasible and efficient. And so I hope that that helps. We can't, if we were an independent school district and they enrolled with us, the general ed revenue would come straight to us. Because it doesn't, it goes to the member districts. We're billing, which Jackie's doing instead of us billing that and taking it out of your general fund. For 2 years, she's able to cover that cost with your ESSER and help your general ed fund budget. I don't know if that helped or hurt, but I gave it a shot.
Thank you, Sherry. Can I give it one more shot? Let's suppose that made up numbers, but if Red Wing was receiving $800,000 for the students from Red Wing who were in that program, and our share of the expenses was $800,000, so it was exactly even. We're just accessing another $350,000 from the government, federal government, to pay those costs. So that's why it actually helps the general fund by allocating it to the Five Rivers Online program.
Okay. My turn yet?
Please.
So are we double dipping or aren't we? The bottom line is, if we have, say, 80 students out, we have X number of need for X number or less teachers, our expenses go down. The way Sherry explained it, what they're shooting for is that it costs less to educate the children that are enrolled in that, or students that are enrolled in the program than what they're going to get back. So what we're trying to do is convert $650,000 to the general fund. Using this terminology, we should be reducing staff in our district and doing other things, and we should find other uses for the $650,000 for ESSER money.
You know, if I could respond.
Maybe it could be used to play for that playground at Bluff. I still think because we're at elementary under this COVID thing, but I'm not an expert. There's got to be other places. Or you're just trying to find a place to park $650,000 so you can get it from the government and you don't have any use for it.
Well, and I'll respond in two ways. First, you know, there's a difference between the fixed costs and variable costs. You know, if there are 2 first graders who've chosen online, we're not going to reduce any costs within our district. So, and that would be true for almost all of this. You know, regardless, Five Rivers Online we'll have the teacher assigned to them, you know, those kinds of things, but we're not able to cut costs dollar for dollar just because of the numbers. So that's the first one. In terms of what you're saying as far as the playground, if we're able to use that ESSER funds to pay for this online cost, then that frees up money in the general fund that we put towards the fund balance. We could pay the playground, we could hire another counselor, we could do all sorts of things. You know, but it gives us the most flexibility.
That's fine. I put my point out there. If we have less students in our district because they're in this program, then we should have less expenses. Things should work its way through. It's been presented, it's going to cost less. I see $650,000 going out through ESSER money. Where are we going to find the money after ESSER is not here then? Let's be realistic. If we're saying it's going to cost us $300,000 a year to have Five Rivers Online option available through the ed district. Let's go up front and say that's the way it is.
Yeah, the one thing though is that a lot of these kids, if we did not have Five Rivers Online, they'll go to another online school.
I definitely would have, and I'm on school board.
Yep. Then you wouldn't be paying $300,000 a year extra besides.
We'd be losing a lot of state aid if they chose to go elsewhere.
I guess I never learned how to manage money properly in my life. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I just don't
no.
understand this here. It doesn't make sense. So I've said my part. I think it's time for me to quit.
I do think the finance committee could look at a really simple chart and doesn't, maybe no one will change their minds if it's the right use or not, but at least it would be, easier for Jackie to explain to all of us, if we actually saw the numbers and how the proportions work.
Can I just make a comment, please? We have never been good. I'm sorry, some of you may have skated through this district and had a great old time and great memories, but a majority of the people have not. So saying that we need to be taking money from kids because we have kids in Five Rivers, no, actually, we should be putting more money into this district to make us better and change. Not because of things don't line up in the finance. For anything great to get going and started, you're going to have to put a little bit money to it and then just see how it goes from there, and then probably maybe hopefully profit from the benefit of the outcome later on. But I have a really huge problem thinking that we were good before and returning to normal and taking more money from the students. No. If I have to come in and do free labor here, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing so we can get past this.
We'll look at this.
Yes, I think it is confusing. I mean, it sounds very complicated and confusing. If we could simplify it a little bit for us, that would be really great.
I think, yeah, and I'm just gonna add, I think, Nick, you're right. It costs money to educate children. It's not widgets for widgets. It never has been. So however the money is being done by our finance person, now we all know, and now it's a conversation we can continue to have about what works best.
I think
But-
also.
I was gonna say, we're not throwing stones on any particular situation or system that we have in place today. I think we're finding out the information and the finance committee can look at it. But education is expensive, and to do it well, it's going to cost money, and to meet the needs of all of our children, it's gonna take online school for some kids. Yes, Jennifer?
I was just gonna say, and also, I think we need to keep in mind that ESSER funds can only be spent on certain things. There are certain parameters, and our Five Rivers Online is one way that money can be spent. But we are getting the ADM that can go in the general fund that can be spent on something else. So it's not that it's, did I kind of say that correctly? So it's not that we're spending more, we're spending the right amount to make sure that we have this Five Rivers and using the ESSER fund source that we have. I just think that's the key here, that these are the funds that need to be spent on Five Rivers. But yes, we are still getting money for the students that are in the program.
And we can look at this as a finance, maybe we'll want to add some things to 2022 and other categories and 23, 24 to spread that out. It doesn't have to be done in a 2-year span. We have 3 years to spend it, or to utilize it, I should say. And then, I mean, we may want to look at this as a group to see how we could maybe culturally relevant text K through 12, instead of spending 215 in 1 year, you may want to spend it out over 2-3 years to get more bang for it. I'm just throwing one out there as an option. So I think we as a finance committee have to have a conversation about that and look at it going forward.
And just to note that in order for it to be in the application, it has to have come out as a need in our needs assessment.
Right.
So we need to take that into account when we're looking at how we're spending these.
Communication manager, we only have 2 years. We need it for the 3rd year too. So that's a need. So I'm just throwing. I'm not here to convolute the discussion, just saying we need to look at it. Next topic.
Perfect, thank you. Next item on our business items is identified official with authority.
And each year we need to identify one person to serve as the Iowa identified official with authority. And that in districts is typically the superintendent. And so that gives me the authority to assign responsibilities to others in terms of reporting for state and federal programs. So for example, let's say Iowa, I authorize Jen Grove to be responsible for submitting the Title I application. I grant Jackie authority to approve all sorts of things, probably 10 or 15 different items. So it's a formality.
Any questions?
Sounds like they're going to Iowa.
I know, right?
And Jen Grove's an Iowa fan.
Somebody's laughing at the state because they purposely made that acronym Iowa.
All right, so the recommendation is to approve Karsten Anderson as the identified official with authority and Lisa Stigurda as the Iowa to add and remove names only for Red Wing School District 25601. Do I have a motion? Motion made by Holly. I need a second.
I'll second it.
Arlen, any other discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Upcoming meetings and future topics, those are listed in our board book. I do want to point out that the committee meetings are actually old from last school year, so I will make sure those get updated for the next agenda package. Our next school board meeting will be on the 20th of September, right here in this place. And then we'll have that open forum at Jefferson on September 27th, along with some committee meetings that we have.
Is there a committee meeting on the 20th?
I believe the personnel.
Personnel
Okay.
and legislative and policy.
Okay.
Finance is that,
The 27th.
yeah. Are we gonna have that at Jefferson?
Yeah, we'll need to. So if that's at 4:45, maybe we can have a tour kind of happening at the same time.
How do we set up all the technology at Jefferson?
We have internet access there, so Kevin says we can still do it there.
Awesome. Okay.
We're gonna verify that before we do.
Okay. All right, anything else on upcoming meetings or future topics? All right, then I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Motion made by Jim, seconded by Holly. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we're adjourned, 8:02.
Nikki, I thought you were gonna oppose that.
What?
I thought you were gonna oppose that.
You calling a meeting?
What, to adjourn?
Yeah.
I thought about it. I like to be different.